you feeling the weight of caring for aging parents while juggling everything else on your plate? You're definitely not alone. So many of us are in the same boat, wondering if we're doing enough or if it's time to get extra support. That's why I'm sitting down today with Senior Care Advisor Lynn Smargis. We're diving into building a caregiving circle you can rely on, recognizing when it's time for a helping hand and letting go of that guilt that so many of us, especially women, carry. If you're ever felt overwhelmed or just wished for a bit of guidance, stay tuned. Lynn's insight might just be what you need. You know, I did a Google search on just the word caregiving, senior caregiving, and there were 14 million views just on that combination alone on Google. And I did not expect that there's so many people that needed help with this kind of topic.
Yeah, well, one of the confusing things is there is so much information about this topic and people really don't know where to start. And I understand that because I took care of my parents at the end of their life like 20 years ago. And so like for me as a young, like as a late 20 something, early 30 something, yeah, like I had the energy to do all of that. And so, but a lot of people who do caregive for their senior parents are our age, they're 50 plus. And I know at this age, I would not have had that same energy to do all of that. And there was also way less information out there 20 years ago. So it can be really confusing and really daunting and just really exhausting just looking through the information alone.
That's very true. How do you stay fit and healthy? I know you love outdoors. Tell us a little bit about it because our podcast is about fitness and health as well.
Yeah. So I actually have a lot of challenges in that field because I have over 10 disabilities. And they're different. Some of them are like mental health disabilities. Some of them are physical disabilities. So like one of my disabilities is I have celiac disease, which if you're not familiar with that, it means like your body has an autoimmune response to gluten. So I can't eat anything with gluten on it. And I have to be really careful when I go out to restaurants and ask all the right questions. And so there's a lot of work that just goes into that one disability. But some of the things I do to stay healthy and fit are so I live in the Pacific Northwest. So I have a farm in McMinnville, Oregon. And during the wintertime, we literally have like 4 or 5 months where it's mostly overcast and cloudy. So one of the things I do, because I have seasonal affective disorder, is I try to get out to the gym as much as possible. And they have what's called a TBE, a total body enhancement, which is not a tanning booth, but it is a infrared light booth. And so I sit in that for 10 minutes every time I go to the gym because all that light really helps my mental health and keep my seasonal affective disorder in check. I also like anytime it's sunny in Oregon in the winter, I always go outside and I'll actually like put off work because getting outside and getting that actual real sunshine is so important, especially in the winter in the Pacific Northwest. I also, I try to get to the gym as much as possible. I'm looking right now for a gym partner, because we all know that accountability partner really helps us get to the gym. And I really love working at the gym, but sometimes like if I wake up in the morning and my chronic pain is too bad, I don't get to the gym. But other things that I do are I use an acupuncturist she's fabulous. She's local here in McMinnville. Her name is Dawn. And if you are looking for an acupuncturist, I always recommend to people, look for someone who has been trained in China. That makes a huge difference between someone who hasn't been trained in China, because I've had 6 different acupuncturists over my life. And the 2 that are my favorite were both trained in China at some point. Some other things I do is just trying to move every day. Like, even if it's just getting in, doing 15, 20 minutes of stretching or getting out walking my dog or things like that. I also work on one of my issues is I don't sleep well at night. So I do a lot of sleep hygiene things to help me to better sleep at night. So those are some of the things that I do to keep healthy and fit, make sure I drink a lot of water, I don't do caffeine after 4 p.m. typically, unless it's on a weekend and I'm out with my husband and I want a cup of coffee after dinner. But that's really the exception and not the rule. So I'll incorporate a lot of good, healthy habits. Another one I do is I do intermittent fasting. So my baseline goal is 13 hours, but I really try to hit 16 hours every day. And depending on how I feel, if I wake up in the morning, I feel like I really need to eat, I just skip the 16-hour and I'll just eat after 13 hours. So those are some of the things I do to stay as healthy as possible.
And it's interesting to hear, because when somebody looks at you, and I saw you zipping around there at the conference and full of energy and vitality, you would never know that Lynn has all these problems with her body that she's dealing so well. And she also has if I'm correct, a podcast on the celiac disease, right?
Yes, travel gluten-free. Yep.
Yep. And so when you look at her, her whole package, and that's what I love also about, is it's about wellness. It's not about hitting the gym really hard or getting these workouts in that are written in stone, but it's what feels good for my body and what do I need today? And how do I live my healthiest life going forward? I love that whole package. And of course, the show is also about intermittent fasting, and a lot of the listeners are practicing intermittent fasting. But now let's dive into the elder care. And one of the things that the questions that came up for me that I did not know is, what is the difference between independent living, assisted living, and memory care?
That is a great question. I get that a lot. And I'm really glad that you asked that, Heike. So thank you. So the difference between independent assisted living and memory care is independent living. It basically means you are coming in and you don't have like a lot of health needs. So maybe someone in independent living just needs a housekeeper to come in once a week, and they might need some assistance with making food. Or they might not need any assistance at all. So you have to be at a healthy, pretty independent lifestyle to get into independent living. And the thing with independent living is, if you do need more medical needs, like if you need more assistance with what we call activities of daily living, such as bathing, dressing, making your food, things like that, then an independent living can assess that. And if you can't be independent to the level you need to be in independent living, then you can go into assisted living. So they're very similar as far as their what you can get into as far as housing, except that independent living, they usually have separate cottages, which assisted living does not. So assisted living, you're in all one building pretty typically. And then there's usually 2 or 3 floors. And with assisted living, you have somebody there 24/7, which in independent living, you don't. So there's always like a med tech or a nurse on staff. And so they can get to you literally within minutes, within 5 minutes if something happens to you. Within independent living, you can get somebody to get to you. And sometimes independent living and assisted living might be in the same community. It really depends on the community, but you don't have that same quick response time as you do if you're in assisted living, because everybody's in one place. And so that's one of the major differences. Another major difference with assisted living, you can get services like medication management. You can have more activities of daily living service. So you can have somebody come in and help you bathe, get dressed. They make your food for you in assisted living. They have beautiful dining rooms you come down and sit and eat at. Both of them are similar to what we call in the industry cruise lines on land. So because a lot of the things are done for you, right? Like with assisted living and independent living, typically you don't have to do any of your own yard work. If you don't want to do any housework, you don't have to. You can just have somebody pay and come in. So it's basically like being on vacation, but you're not going anywhere, because you get all of the similar services that a cruise line will provide at assisted living. And they have tons of different activities. Like it's not just bingo or crafts. Like they do armchair travel. I've seen places bring in like concert pianists, cellists, harpists, like all these wonderful performers. There's a lot of different activities, and some different assisted living places and independent living places like specialize in different types of activities. Some of them are a certain religious base, some of them are not. So there's a very, very, very wide variety of different types of assisted living places and what they offer. But typically an assisted living is somewhere you can get more medical management done. But things they don't do typically at assisted livings, and all of them are different. So that's where like people like me, like a senior advisor comes in, is some of them don't do any IVs. So like if you need like a diabetic injection, some assisted living places don't offer that service. Or if you need some type of like Hoyer lift or 2-person assistance, that's typically not something an assisted living provides. So that's part of a skilled nursing facility. And that's a whole different other type of service community that you can get into as well. But memory care typically with a memory care community, you need to have a diagnosis of dementia. So you don't have to know what specific dementia, because there are like 10 different types of dementia you can be diagnosed with, the most common being Alzheimer's disease. But you have to have typically a diagnosis of dementia to get into a memory care. They're typically twice as expensive as assisted living, because you have a higher level of care, because you have a higher caregiver ratio. So like in assisted living, it's typically like 1:8 or 1:9, depending on the assisted living place. But in memory care, it's typically a 1:5 or 6, because you need a higher level of care, because people in memory care typically need more assistance, because, you know, you have you're not cognitively aware of what's going on and things like that. So in a memory care facility, typically what you see is you'll have like a central hub where the main nurses station is, where they do medication management and a lot of like different nursing things. And then you'll usually have wings. And typically in a memory care place, they have 4 wings of like anywhere from 5 to 10 bedrooms. Usually they're studio apartments or shared apartments, and everything is geared towards people who have memory issues. So everything can be locked down in a minute. All the doors have keypads on them, so only staff who have the code can get in and out of the areas. So it makes it very secure and safe. There is typically an outdoor area that's locked. So members of the community can go outside on their own. They can, you know, enjoy the outside space. They can do gardening. Typically in a memory care place, all of the plants in a garden are edible, because, you know, people with memory issues, they don't, they'll just take things and put them in their mouth like it's like a toddler lots of times, and they don't think. And so all of the plants are edible. So if they go out and eat the plants, they're completely safe. And they're very geared towards doing activities that people in memory care like to do, that are repetitive. Typically, like you see a lot of coloring going on, puzzles, things like that. They do bring in some other different activities, but typically with memory care, as opposed to assisted living, they typically do not do a lot of group outings, because with memory care, it's a lot harder. You have to have more people on the group outing. You know, there's more of a risk and liability with bringing people from memory care on an outing. And so with assisted living, you have a lot more opportunities for different activities and going out in groups and shopping on your own and things like that. Whereas memory care, you always have that. There's always a staff member with somebody when they're going out on an activity or a doctor's visit or things like that. So those are some of the basic differences. There's some more, but that's kind of the overall blanket differences between the 3.
You know, this is super helpful to know, because all these words are thrown around very liberate. And I know that I don't know that I came across memory care and I was like, oh, I asked Lynn, she knows. And so guys, you hear now what the difference is, because our next question ties right into that, which is, when do we know that the person that we're caring for or about to care for is ready to move into a facility like this? And then later on, we get into what our roles are as caregivers. But when do we know it's time to go? Because from almost everybody I talk to, they hear, my parents don't want to go there. They feel like they're locked up. It's not the luxury cruise liner that you described. They all have fears of going away from their homes. What steps would you say can help with this? Or how do you find out that it is? And what can someone do to say, hey, let's maybe think about that?
Yeah, I love that question, Heike, and thank you for asking it, because a lot of the fear that I have recognized from working with clients is that they feel like their independence is going to be taken away. Or a lot of the older generation know the old nursing homes, which were like Lysol, they smelled bad, like they were very sterile, right? Like I know those nursing homes because I remember my grandfather was in one in the 70s, my grandfather's brother. And so, yeah, they're not fun places. The assisted living places and independent memory care today are nothing like that. So that's what's now called skilled nursing facility. So that's what is now considered a nursing home. And that is not independent assisted living or memory care. That is really for high level medical needs people. Like if you just got out of the hospital and you still need a lot of medical care, that's what a skilled nursing facility or nursing home is for. So a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm going to go in there and I'm going there to die, which is the complete opposite of what it actually is, because assisted living is actually there to help you live your most independent life you can with all of the, health challenges you might be experiencing. And there actually have been people who have gone into assisted living and moved up to independent living because the isolation they were feeling at home was causing a lot of physical problems in their body. And as we know, right, like somatic responses to emotional distress is a real thing. And so some people have actually moved from assisted living into independent because once they've gotten in and got that socialization and they're not feeling isolated, a lot of their physical symptoms have been resolved. And so they can now be independent. And so getting back to your question though, is that talking to your parents about their fears, like, hey, why don't you want to go into assisted living? Maybe your dad doesn't want to leave his workshop out back, right? Maybe maybe they're afraid that, of just letting go of all of their stuff, which they don't have to do. There's a lot of different senior move organizers and people who specialize in those types of things. But there are some common warning signs that if you see happening to your parents, you would definitely want to consider talking to your parents about moving into assisted living or maybe some independent living, but more so on the assisted living side. So like if you visit your parents and you notice your mom or dad hasn't showered in a few days, that could also be a sign of dementia, but it could also be a sign of depression. And so and isolation, like depression from isolation. So if you see that sign where you see like you come over and like your parents have soiled pants or like they're not keeping their house and things are just piling up in their house. Another sign is falls. Like falls are the number one reason people end up in the hospital long-term. And after a fall, and if you ended up in the hospital long-term, people generally go downhill and it's hard for them to get better. And so if your parents have fallen once, even if you have two parents living at home, I would highly consider assisted living because I could tell you stories. I'll tell you this one recent story I learned from one of my friends. Her father-in-law had a stroke and he was in his house and his son was only 20 minutes away, but of course didn't know his dad had a stroke. They didn't find him for 8 hours. And because it took them so long to get to him, now he's lost all his voice and speech. And he is like very severely limited physically. Had he been in assisted living, someone would have gotten to him in 5 minutes. They could have gotten him the stroke medication and he would have been way better. Like he would have been much more independent. But now he's stuck living the remainder of his life with no voice and limited physical activity because no one could get to him in time. I actually am working right now with a client who his mom, again, he lived 15 minutes from her. She fell out getting out of bed and ended up internally bleeding. They didn't find her for 24 hours. So she was literally laying on the floor for 24 hours. Like I'm just imagining me as myself, right? Laying on the floor for 24 hours, you can't get any help because she couldn't reach her phone because she was on the floor. She didn't have an emergency pendant to hit. So she had no way of communicating with anybody. The son realized she hadn't reached out in 24 hours. He went to her home. He found her on the floor. She ended up spending over 40 days in the hospital with sepsis because of that incident. Had she been in assisted living, that could have completely been avoided. So if your parents have one fall, I suggest highly, highly recommend talking to them about moving into assisted living. Some other signs would be like, if we said parents not taking care of house and not just like they forgot to do the dishes a couple times, but like dishes are piling up, like 2 sinks full of dishes and there's dishes all over the countertop kind of thing. If you realize that your parents are not remembering things, not like, oh, I couldn't remember where I left my keys, but like they're forgetting to feed their dog or their cat, that's a huge red flag for some type of memory issue that's not related to aging. So like some memory issues that are relating to aging, like that I'm experiencing right now as a 51-year-old are, where did I put my keys? Where did I leave my cell phone? I lost my glasses yesterday and I couldn't find my other pair of glasses. So that's another normal memory issue, right? But like the things with dementia are like people not remembering common names, or they're not remembering what they told you an hour ago, even if you like remind them. So things like that. So things that would not be normal, like it's associated with like normal memory loss, right? Yeah. Another reason why you want to get your parents into assisted living is if they had a lot of car accidents. So like one of my clients, his mom totaled 2 cars in 6 months. The last one, she drove through a storefront, and the states are not good about taking away driver's license. So she actually independently gave up driving, but the state never took her license away, even though she went through a storefront with her car. So
that's ridiculous.
Things like that are definitely warning signs that your parents may be better served in assisted living, because basically what it comes down to is, I know people are really attached to their personal things in their home. And I get that because when I went through my divorce, I had to give up a home I thought I was going to retire in. Right. And that was very emotionally hard for me. And I had to get past that. And I did. It took some time. But like, you have to look at this last stage of life as moving on into a different phase, not like, oh, I'm getting ready to like pass on, which a lot of people think, and they fear death, which is a totally normal response. But you have to think of it like, hey, when you're a little kid, you're a toddler, and then you get into grade school, and then you think you're all bad, and then you get into middle school, and then you're like, oh, I'm really scared because I'm in sixth grade. And then, you get to the top of the food chain, and then you go to the bottom again in high school, and then you have college, and then you get married, and then you have kids. So this is just another phase of life, right? It's just the last phase you're going to go through before you move on to the next stage, which is not being on earth. But if you look at it from that kind of perspective, it has a much more optimistic feel. Like you're not going there to just sit around and not do anything. You're going there to have time to experience all the things you wanted to experience that you may not have gotten checked off your bucket list with the last, years of your life. And so it really is helpful to really just sit down and talk to your parents about their fears.
What are some strategies, Lynn, that may be effective overcoming that personal guilt and the societal pressure when it comes to delegating, which would be sending somebody to a home, or which we could dive into caregiving as in the neighbor, the family member, and things like that. What could people, how can they work around those personal guilt and that societal pressure?
So the first thing I'm going to put out there is I took care of both my parents. They came down with cancer within the same year. And I was going to school. I was trying to finish up with my bachelor's degree. And I'm an only child. So I had no siblings to rely on. My husband at the time wasn't that great. And with, being dependable and doing certain things. So what I did was I sat down and I was like, okay, one of the things that was really important to my dad, because both my parents were blue collar workers and my dad had gotten laid off from multiple jobs and had a hard time finding a new job. So it was really important for my dad to see me graduate with my bachelor's degree, because in his mind, if he saw me graduate with my bachelor's degree, he would feel safe knowing that I would be okay, right? Because I had a college degree, so I wouldn't be stuck like him being, laid off from blue collar jobs. And so it was really important for me to get my bachelor's degree. When my dad was first diagnosed with cancer, they gave him 6 months to live. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to get my bachelor's degree in time, but he actually lived for 3 years. So I was juggling taking care of 2 parents with cancer. My kids were both 10 and under, and going to school full time to get my degree before my dad passed away, because I wanted him to see me walk. And I actually did do that. I got my degree. He saw me walk in August, and he passed a few months later in January. So that was like a really big moment for me to like watch my dad getting choked up in the audience, like watching me walk, because sorry, I just wanted him to have that peace of mind before he passed. And it was really important to me. And there was no way I was going to be able to do that as a single person without any support from siblings. So I had to make the decision that if I'm going to do this for my dad and do this for his peace of mind, and so that I know he'll be okay, that I was going to have to recruit people and have them help me so I could support my dad and I could do the things that I needed to do before my dad passed away. Okay. So what I did was I recruited my friends for everything. And when I recruited my friends, the most important thing I will pass on to your listeners is ask them to do a specific job. Don't just say, I need help, because no one will know what you need help with. So I would ask one friend who our kids went to the same school together, hey, can you pick up my kids after school on this day? I would ask another friend, hey, can we have a play date on this day because I need to bring my mom to chemo? Hey, can you pick up groceries for my parents? This is the list. When you go shopping this week, I would really appreciate it, and drop it off to their house. One of my friends was studying to be a nurse, and one of my mom's chemo medications, they paid for the medication, but they wouldn't pay for someone to inject it into her, which was like $700. I'm like,
whoa,
right? It's like the whole drug company scam thing. It's so ridiculous. And so my friend who was a nurse would come over once a week and inject my mom with her medication that she needed. And so just doing that, because there is honestly, Heike, no way I would have been able to take care of my parents the way that I did if I did not recruit my friends from the outside to do that. And your friends want to help. Like I had a client, she's like, oh, my friends don't want to be bothered. No, your friends want to help, but they need a specific job to do. They need to know what they can do to help you. And anything small they can do is not too small. Even if you have something big they need to do, ask a best friend, ask somebody who you're really close to. And if they're really your friend, they're going to help you in some way. They might not be able to help you with that task. If you ask them like, hey, can you pick up groceries? And they're like, oh, I can't pick up groceries this week. Ask them what they can do, like what days are available. Hey, if you can't pick up groceries this week, would you mind just picking up my dad's prescription at the pharmacy when you're out? Something like that. That's really easy to do. And so things like that, don't like I know as women, we tend to think, oh, we have to do everything, but that's not true. Like your job as a child is to be the child, right? And your parents, no matter how experienced you are or smart you are or old you are, you're always going to be their child and they're not going to want to listen to you. So I always say like, they always incorporate like the help of like a close friend that they have, right? To talk to them, to talk to your parents, or like maybe they're really close with a clergy member, or they have somebody at their bingo club that they're really close to. Incorporate them to help as well, because they're close to them. And not only can they help with doing things, but they can help talk to your parents about sensitive issues you might not be able to get through to them. And so that's really important. But my whole thing, I tell my clients is like, look, you're the child. Like if you want to have a parent-child relationship with your parents, you can't do that if you're bringing them to medical appointments 5 times a week. You're being their errand runner, right? Like you're just doing anything you can hire somebody for. So any service or job you can hire somebody for is something you can delegate out to a friend or family member, or you can also hire somebody. Like breaks, like caregivers don't take enough breaks. And it's been shown over and over again in the data that a caregiver's health always declines when you don't take time for yourself. So even hiring someone to come into their home once a week, so you have a break every Thursday or whatever day it is you want to break, that's super important, because then you get time to breathe and relax and do your own thing, even if it's for a day, right? And so maybe you hire a senior concierge service to go out and do the food shopping and house cleaning for your parents because you don't have time to house clean and food shop for them. That's perfectly fine. And that doesn't mean you're being a bad child. That means you're actually being a great child, because you just need to take care of all their needs. Now, whether that's hiring somebody or having a friend do it is perfectly fine, as long as they're getting quality service. Now, you might hire a service and you might find out it's not a great quality service. So find another service. Maybe you can, like, if you need a senior advisor in your area, because one of my jobs is like referring services to clients. So give you a really quick example. One of my recent clients, he moved his mom out of his house into his home, but they need to sell their house and she has a lot of stuff. So I sent him referred to him a great realtor in the Portland area, a great senior move organizer who's going to organize their whole house before they put it on the market, and also a great moving service to actually help them move her things into storage that she doesn't want to sell, but she can't get rid of right now. And so senior advisors like myself in your area really know the really good, like home health services, non-medical transportation, all of that stuff. So really utilize them for those types of things, especially if your parents are moving into assisted living. It's very helpful. But yeah, like in order for you, and you can sit down with your parents and talk to them and say, look, mom and dad, I really want to support you, but I can't do it all on my own. So we need, like, what are you comfortable with coming into your house? Like, are you comfortable with having a house cleaner come in? Are you comfortable with having someone come in to take care of you? Because I can't do it 7 days a week. Like, I just can't. Like, that's really stressful on me. And so if you come at it from an I perspective and not saying like, oh, you can't handle the house and you can't do this, like they're going to get very defensive if you come in like that. But if you come in from a heartfelt place of like, I really want to support you, but I can't do it all on my own, they're going to be more receptive to having help come in. And then you can delegate help also to your friends and say like, hey, I've got some friends that want to help you out. They're really great people. You really love them. They can do XYZ for you, kind of deal, and things like that. And if your parents aren't receptive to people coming into your house, find ways you can have people help you. Like maybe your friend goes out grocery shopping, gives you the groceries, and you bring it to your parents.
You ask close family members and they are not following up. They're just saying, yeah, I heard you. Oh, I know. Let's use mom. I've also always mom. We're both are moms. Mom's so difficult. I don't know how you deal with her. What do you do when the family members are so reluctant and don't want to pick up slack?
I think the best answer to that is a family mediator. Like, honestly, family dynamics have so much in them, Heike, as you know, like, right. Like we bring all of our emotional baggage from childhood in, whether we know it or not. Like it's there. It's in the back of our head speaking to us when we're chatting with our family members, and we have those defenses. And that's completely normal, right? Like that's being a human being. But you're not going to move forward if people are constantly arguing with a good care plan, which you can hire somebody to actually make a care plan and arrange doctor's visits as well. So, I mean, almost every service you can think of is out there. But yeah, I would say hire, like, talk, like sit down and have a family talk. And if they're not, like, if no one's budging, I would say hire a mediator, because one of the things is that everybody's not going to be happy with the plan, but usually everybody will be okay with it. And that's what you need, right? You don't need everybody to be extremely like, oh my God, this is the best plan ever. You just need everybody to be on the same page to move forward. And if a family mediator is going to do it, invest in the money to do it, because let me tell you, the stress and hassle of trying to deal with other family members, who everybody's bringing in their emotional baggage from their childhood, is not worth it. To spend the money and keep your sanity, because you're going to have way less stress in the long term hiring a family mediator. That's a good family mediator.
I'm no exception. My mom lives in Germany, both of my parents, and my brother is there all the time. And he does feel overwhelmed
Yes.
and guilty and all these things that we've talked about so far, because he can't be there for mom 24/7. I was like, this is not your job.
But that's not our job as a child. Yeah. So people feel like, oh, that's my job, is to be there 24/7. Your job is not to be there 24/7. Your job as the child of your parents well, not your job, but like if you care about your parents, I should say, right? Because not everybody does. And I've had those clients and they're not fun to deal with. If you care about your parents, your main priority or concern is to make sure they have everything they need to live their most independent lifestyle. And if you're doing that, whether that's hiring out half the services and then coming in and checking up on them once or twice a week, that's perfectly fine. Like, and again, like, as you said, boundaries are so important. Like if you don't put those boundaries up, your health is going to go downhill like easily within a year. So,
in my practice, when I see people in person in my Pilates studio, many times conversations like that come up, because people have been with me for years. So my studio is not just seasonal. I have clients that have been with me for 20 years. So they're like almost family, and they come in and they're like just pouring out their heart. And then they said, that felt so good. And I did 10 Pilates exercises. I'm great. I'm here to support you no matter how I can help. And I always have good life advice and wellness and what they can do and how they, like you said, boundaries, and for exercise for the caregivers. Like, no, you need to exercise. It's not okay for your mom to hog all the time. Your time is your time. Here's the exercises that you planned on doing. Now do them and put yourself first. But yeah.
Yeah, like you're a great resource. Like I would recommend any of my clients to go talk to you about like setting boundaries and things like that. Cause setting boundaries. Like if you're working, I always work from the top down, like, okay, what are my goals? Right. And if you need to take care of your parents, number one is set boundaries. Number two, have that discussion with them, and, whether it's around boundaries or whatever. But like a lot of my clients, one of the first, like they tell me all their issues they're having. And one of the first things I said is, have you sat down and had a family conversation? And 9 out of 10 times, the answer is no.
How important is this for self-care for caregivers? I know we talked about this to prevent burnout.
110%, Heike.
That's the whole answer. 100%. Take care of yourself.
110%. Yes. Because especially as women, right? Like we're the first ones to give up our health for other people. But why? Because we're female? Like, no, like that's it's not okay for anybody to do that, to give up I mean, like, yes, it's stressful no matter what. You're going to have stress, right? You're going to have emotional exhaustion, things like that. And I mean, it's not that going through caregiving is going to be so easy if you hire other people or whatever. It's always going to be stressful, because you're always going to be like, part of you is going to be grieving, right? Especially like I remember when my parents were diagnosed and my dad was diagnosed at stage 4, I started grieving 3 years before he died, because he was diagnosed at stage 4. And I knew the end was closer than not. And so you are going through all of these emotions. So get the support, like whether it's hiring Heike or, you have a counselor you already go to, whatever it is, you put those support things in place early on, because a lot of times the mistake that people make is like, they're like, oh, I feel fine right now. But then they get into that day-to-day cycle and you don't realize how bad it gets until one of your friends comes up to you and is like, what is wrong? Like, you don't look good. right? Or like you're getting sick all the like your husband or your spouse or your partner says you're getting sick all the time. Like you're like, I can see that something's really wrong. Don't like people wait way too long. I always tell people put those resources in place as soon as possible. Like get that coach or that counselor right away. Like find the easy resources like the housekeeper, whatever, to get put in place, because you're going to get into a cycle of care if you don't have those boundaries put in place where you're not going to realize how bad it is until maybe you end up in the hospital or you end up on like antidepressants or worse, because you're caregiving for your parents and you're not taking that time for yourself.
So Lynn, thank you so much for being here, and we'll talk soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on again, Heike.
If today's episode hits home and you've got questions or just want to share your thoughts, send me a DM on Instagram at Heike Yates. I'd love to hear from you. And if you're ready to take charge of your health, whether you're a caregiver or not, and actually build lasting habits, check out the Pursue Your Spark Blueprint. It's my 8-week program designed to help you feel stronger and more energized and finally make yourself a priority. The link's in the show notes to see if you're a right fit for the program. I'd love for you to join us. Next up, if you ever felt like it's never enough, no matter how hard you work, in our next episode, we will discuss that frustrating feeling head on. We explore why so many of us, especially in midlife, judge ourselves so harshly when it comes to our strength, fitness, and health, and how those shoulds only hold us back. I'll share a powerful story from a client who struggled with self-judgment and how she learned to let go and actually enjoy her progress. Together, we'll explore simple ways to shift our mindsets so we can get started celebrating our wins, big and small.